and welcome to Crimes Through Time, snapshots of crime history. In the annals of Victorian crime, few names inspire such genuine horror as Frederick Bailey Deeming, a charismatic conman, bigamist and family annihilator, who left a trail of cemented corpses across 2 continents. Between July and December 1891, he slaughtered 2 wives and 4 children, burying them beneath freshly laid concrete floors in homes thousands of miles apart. His capture in 1892 caused a global sensation, with newspapers from London to New York speculating wildly about his past. Was this mustachioed monster merely a murderous confidence man, or as many suspected then, could he have been the notorious Jack the Ripper? Today we'll trace the blood-soaked journey of Frederick Bailey Deeming from his humble beginnings in Leicestershire to his final moments on the gallows in Melbourne jail. This is the story of a Victorian villain, so reviled that crowds gathered to cheer his execution, a man whose crimes were so shocking that 3 separate death masks were created to preserve his likeness for posterity. On the 30th of July 1853, Frederick Bailey Deeming was born in a small market town in Leicestershire, England. His father, Thomas, worked as a brazier, a craftsman who made brass items, while his mother, Anne, raised their large brood of children. Little is known about his childhood, but what evidence we have points to early signs of a deeply troubled individual. By age 16, young Frederick had had enough of family life. In 1869, he ran away from home and took to the sea. For the next decade, Frederick would drift between ports, gradually developing the skills that would later define his criminal career: charm, deception, and the ability to reinvent himself at a moment's notice. It wasn't until February 1881, at the age of 27, that Frederick appeared to settle down. He married Mary James in Lower Tranmere, England. To all outward appearances, his marriage marked the beginning of a respectable life for the young man. Indeed, shortly after their wedding, Frederick and Marie emigrated to Australia, like thousands of other Brits seeking new opportunities in the colonies. Between 1881 and 1885, the couple established themselves in Sydney. Frederick set up a gas fitting shop, and the young family, now including 2 daughters, lived in the suburb of Petersham. On the surface, they appeared to be living the Victorian middle-class dream. But beneath the veneer of respectability, Frederick Deeming's true nature was beginning to emerge. By 1885, the cracks in Frederick's respectable facade began to show. His business mysteriously burnt down, and rather than rebuilding honestly, he turned to petty theft. Perhaps most tellingly, he began stealing lead from the very gutters of clients who had trusted him. In 1887, his criminal activities escalated, when he was charged with fraudulent insolvency in Sydney. But Frederick wasn't about to face justice. He disappeared while out on bail, abandoning all pretense of being a respectable businessman. For the next several years, he led a nomadic existence, crisscrossing the globe between England, Australia, South Africa, and South America. Sometimes his growing family accompanied him, other times they were left behind while he pursued his next scheme. By 1888, Frederick had established himself in Cape Town, South Africa. There he continued his pattern of confidence schemes and fraud, culminating in his involvement in the Transvaal diamond mine swindle in 1889. Let me know in the comments if a video on that would interest you. Following his elaborate fraud, Frederick returned to England on the steamer Yumna. Fellow passengers would later recall the ostentatious display of jewellery and money, wealth almost certainly acquired through criminal means. In November 1889, Frederick arrived in Hull, England. Never once to use his real name when a false identity would do, he began calling himself Harry Lawson, and crafted an elaborate backstory as a retired sheep farmer from Australia. He lodged near Hull in Beverley, where his charm and apparent wealth soon caught the attention of his landlord's 21-year-old daughter, Helen Matheson. Despite being married to Marie, who by now had bore him 4 children, Frederick had no qualms about pursuing young Helen. On the 18th of February 1890, he bigamously married her, adding another crime to his growing list of offences. The honeymoon was short-lived. By March, Frederick had disappeared with the expensive gifts given to the couple, leaving his new bride humiliated and bewildered. 1890 marked a turning point in Frederick's criminal evolution. After abandoning Helen Matheson, he briefly reconnected with his actual wife Marie and their children now living in Birkenhead. He gave Marie money and spun yet another tale, claiming he was leaving for South America. But Frederick's luck was running out. His swindling activities had finally caught up with him. He was arrested in Montevideo for a jewellery swindle committed in Hull and extradited to England. From September 1890 to July 1891, he served 9 months in Hull jail for forgery. This prison sentence would be the last punishment he would receive until his final conviction, and it did nothing to deter his escalated criminal behaviour. Upon his release in July 1891, Frederick made his way to the Liverpool area, settling in Rainhill, Merseyside. Now using the alias Albert Williams, he leased a villa known as Dinham Villa, supposedly for a military friend he called Colonel Brooks. What happened next would shock even the hardened Victorian sensibilities. On or about the 26th of July 1891, Frederick Deeming committed his first known murders. His victims, his wife Marie and their 4 children, Bertha aged 10, Mary aged 7, Sydney aged 5, and baby Leela just 18 months old. After killing his entire family, Frederick did not flee. Instead, he carefully buried all 5 bodies underneath the kitchen floor of Dinham Villa, which he had recently had cemented over, specifically for this purpose. But the most chilling aspect of these murders wasn't just their premeditated nature, it was what he did next. For weeks, perhaps months, he continued to live at Dinham Villa, walking daily over the very floor beneath which his family were laid. And during this time, with his wife and children beneath his feet, Frederick Bailey Deeming began courting a new victim, Emily Lydia Mather, the daughter of a local shopkeeper. By September 1891, their courtship had progressed rapidly. The young woman, oblivious to the fate of his previous family, was charmed by the man she knew as Albert Williams. On the 22nd of September, less than 2 months after murdering his first family, Frederick married Emily in Rainhill. To friends and neighbours, they appeared to be a happy newlywed couple, preparing for a new life together in the colonies. By November, the couple boarded the German steamship Kaiser Wilhelm II, bound for Australia. They arrived in Melbourne on the 9th of November, and within a week, Frederick, now using yet another alias, Druin, had rented a house at 57 Andrew Street in Windsor, a suburb of Melbourne. On the 17th of December 1891, just days after moving in, Frederick visited John Wood's ironmongery in St Kilda, where he purchased cement and tools. The purpose of these materials would soon become horrifyingly clear. Sometime between the 24th and 25th of December, yes, on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, Frederick murdered Emily. The post-mortem would later reveal that he had cut her throat after fracturing her skull. Following the same modus operandi he had used in Rainhill, he buried her body beneath the hearthstone of the bedroom, covering it with a fresh layer of cement. It's worth noting the calculated nature of Frederick's crimes. In both cases, he had prepared the means of concealment before committing the murder. He had a pattern: marry, murder, bury beneath cement, and move on to the next victim. But this time his methodical approach would prove his undoing. In January 1892, rather than immediately fleeing Melbourne, he auctioned off household goods, possibly Emily's wedding presents, while staying at the Cathedral Hotel under the name of Mr. Duncan. Never one to waste time between victims, he approached Holt's matrimonial agency seeking yet another wife. On the 12th of January, he travelled to Sydney, now calling himself Baron Swanson. There he met and began courting Kate Rousfell. By the 22nd of January, perhaps sensing that a discovery of his Melbourne crime was imminent, Frederick departed for Western Australia. The following day he boarded a vessel from Melbourne to Perth, and by late January he had found work as an engineer at Fraser Gold Mine in South Cross, Western Australia. By the 8th of February, showing his characteristic confidence, he wrote to Kate, urging her to join him in Western Australia. Completely unaware of his true nature, she was likely making preparations to do just that when Frederick's world finally began to collapse around him. On the 3rd of March, a prospective tenant viewing the house at 57 Andrew Street in Windsor complained of a disagreeable smell. The police were called to investigate. When officers pried up the hearth in the bedroom, they made a grisly discovery: the decomposing body of Emily Mather. News of the discovery spread rapidly through Melbourne, then across Australia, and soon reached England via telegram. The hunt for Albert Williams, as he was known to authorities, was underway. On the 7th of March, a warrant was issued for Williams' arrest, and by the 9th, a reward of £100, a substantial sum at this time, was offered for information leading to his capture and conviction. Meanwhile, in Western Australia, Frederick is now living as Baron Swanson, continuing working at the gold mine, apparently confident in his new identity. But his distinctive appearance and manner had not gone unnoticed. And on the 11th of March, police managed to track him down to Southern Cross, and by the 14th he was officially arrested. When confronted, Frederick claimed innocence and brazenly denied ever having been in Windsor. But the most shocking development was yet to come, and that was on the 16th of March 1892. While Frederick was in custody in Australia, attention turned to his previous residence in England. Police visited Dinham Villa and made the horrifying discovery beneath the kitchen floor: the bodies of Marie and her 4 children. The scale of Frederick's crimes stunned the public on both continents. Here was a man who had murdered not 1 but 2 wives, along with 4 innocent children. Newspapers across the world covered the case in lurid detail. An inquest was held at Rainhill on the 18th of March, where Frederick's brothers identified Marie and provided accounts of his activities. The evidence against him was mounting rapidly. An extradition hearing took place in Perth Police Court on the 24th of March, setting the stage for Frederick's return to Melbourne to face justice for the murder of Emily Mather. Under heavy armed guard, on the 27th of March 1892, Frederick began his journey back to Melbourne. He was escorted by Detective Causey and others as they boarded a train from Midland Junction to Albany amid furious public demonstrations. During the transit, perhaps realising how recognisable his appearance had become, Frederick used a piece of broken glass to remove his distinctive moustache, a futile attempt to alter his appearance. On the 1st of April, the SS Ballarat anchored at Port Phillip Bay, and Frederick was taken directly to the police court. The following day, he was formally charged with Emily Mather's murder. The trial would begin on April 25th, 1892, at the Melbourne Supreme Court. Public interest was intense. The courtroom was packed with spectators eager to glimpse the man now known as the Monster. The defence was led by Alfred Deakin, a prominent lawyer who would later become Prime Minister of Australia. On the 28th and 29th of April, Deakin attempted an insanity plea, arguing that Frederick suffered from hereditary madness. To support this claim, he presented evidence that his mother had been confined to an asylum and that Frederick himself had experienced hallucinations of his mother's ghost ordering him to kill. The prosecution, however, painted a different picture, one of a calculating killer who murdered for financial gain and to facilitate his bigamous lifestyle. They emphasised the premeditative nature of the crimes, pointing to the purchase of the cement and tools before each murder. After 4 days of testimony, the case went to the jury on the 1st of May. They deliberated for just 1 hour and 20 minutes before returning their verdict: guilty. Sentence was confirmed by the Executive Council on the 9th of May, and on the 19th, the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council refused leave to appeal. Frederick Bailey Deeming had reached the end of all his legal options. Frederick was hanged at Melbourne Jail on the 23rd of May 1892 at precisely 10:01 a.m. The following day, his body was buried in an unmarked grave within the prison grounds. Outside the prison, a crowd had gathered to witness the execution. When word spread that justice had been served, there were cheers and even celebrations in the street. an unusual response that speaks to the public outrage his crimes had provoked. Even before his execution, speculation had begun to swirl around the tantalising question: could Frederick Bailey Deeming have been Jack the Ripper? From March 1892 onwards, newspapers on both sides of the globe published articles suggesting this connection. On the 17th of March, the New York Times ran headlines explicitly linking Frederick to the Whitechapel murders. The theory gained traction for several reasons. First, Frederick's movement during 1888, when the Ripper killings occurred, were somewhat obscure, though he may well have been in England at the time. Second, he had demonstrated extreme violence towards women. Third, and perhaps most intriguingly, the Metropolitan Police kept a death mask of Frederick in their crime museum at Scotland Yard, suggesting they considered him a person of interest. Additionally, Frederick's methodical approach to murder, the careful planning and concealment of bodies, showed a calculating nature similar to that attributed to the Ripper. However, there were significant challenges to this theory. Some sources claimed that Frederick was either in prison or in South Africa during the Whitechapel murders. The official police position was that he was not a serious Ripper suspect, and criminologists have noted important differences in the modus operandi between Frederick and Jack the Ripper. More than a century after his execution, Frederick Bailey Deeming's legacy continues to fascinate and horrify. 3 copies of his death masks exist, one at the Metropolitan Police Museum in Sidcup, another at the old Melbourne jail where he was executed, and a third in the collection of the State Library of Victoria. The State Library also holds a cast of Frederick's right hand, photographs, books, newspaper articles and letters relating to the case, a comprehensive archive of this Victorian villain. At Melbourne General Cemetery stands a monument to Emily Mather, funded by public subscription, a testament to the profound impact a murder had on the community. In 2011, a Discovery Channel documentary featuring former Scotland Yard detective Robin Napper concluded that evidence points to Frederick being Jack the Ripper, reigniting the debate about this enduring mystery. Whether or not Frederick was Jack, his crimes stand as a grim reminder of a dark chapter of Victorian history, a tale of deception, bigamy and murder that's shocked the world and continues to chill the blood of those who study it today. Frederick, I believe, was a serial killer in the making. Had his latest amour joined him in Western Australia, he would have murdered her too. But do I believe he is Jack the Ripper? Unlikely. Jack was an opportunist, and Frederick murdered women close to him, ladies who trusted him and whom he knew. I think the marriage was an important part of his modus operandi, but I turn the question over to you. Do you believe that Frederick was a credible Jack the Ripper suspect? Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and let me know what you think of this case in the comments below, and I look forward to welcoming you in the next one.